Would this be a good gun to carry as a police officer, an armed citizen, or maybe a soldier? This, of course, is the outstanding SIG P226 coupled up with an M6 laser illuminator and light, and it has a factory 20-round magazine in it, plus one in the chamber. That's 21 rounds. I would answer yes. I think it's a great gun to carry in certain situations. Welcome to Nutnfancy's Philosophy of Use. I call it POU video regarding mobility versus firepower. And I'm going to start it by showing you this gun. Excellent gun. But is it the lightest and most portable gun out there? No, it's not. But in some situations, maybe you're a SWAT officer, and the propensity of you having to use your sidearm is high. Maybe you're a DEA agent and you're serving warrants, and you need something that's full size. And along with that comes a higher velocity, longer sight radius, and a more powerful cartridge. Of course, you could get this in 40 or 357 SIG, both outstanding cartridges as well. Or you could couple it up with a SIG P220, a 45 cal. All great guns, good cartridges all. Now, but is this appropriate for all situations, a SIG P226? And prepare for some philosophy and some background and historical information where I make my point on the subject, mobility versus firepower. Maybe this isn't appropriate for all situations. Maybe it's too bulky, too big, too heavy. Yes, even a SIG 226. Weighing at around, what, 32 ounces unloaded without the accessories? 30, actually, maybe around 30 ounces, I think. So maybe in some situations, this is appropriate. A Beretta 950 Jetfire in 25 auto. Now, a lot of people and a lot of the gun press laughs at a gun like this. They say you're an idiot if you carry anything smaller than a 9mm. That's how conventional wisdom usually addresses a gun like this. But of course, I'll deviate from conventional wisdom when I feel it's foolish. And that's a foolish way to think. Because for a lot of people, licensed gun holders, especially you sheepdogs out there, you armed, responsible, and mature civilians that are licensed to carry, this might be your best option. A lightweight pistol along the lines of a Beretta 950 Jetfire. Yeah, it's a 25 auto, but guess what? That beats nothing. And a lot of guys who opt to carry a larger gun like the SIG or a 1911 or a Beretta 92, all these heavier, bigger, full-size autos often are found without their guns when it counts the most. Whereas someone who's committed to carry something more portable, i.e. with more mobility versus more firepower, is armed up. And when it matters most, they have something. And I'll tell you what, 25 auto is no slouch. It's responsible for more bad guys and, unfortunately, all kinds of people being killed than probably any other caliber. 25, 22. I think that's more because it's more ubiquitous, i.e. it's everywhere, than maybe some of the other versions. We'll talk about that in separate videos, but here is my philosophy on mobility versus firepower. Firepower is going to include, by the way, a lot of different things under that umbrella. We're going to include armor, we're going to include a higher caliber, more capability or more capable cartridge, or a more capable knife. Because this does not just pertain to guns. We're talking about knives. We're talking about backpacks. You're going to hear me refer a lot to this mobility versus firepower argument. I've kind of alluded to it already in some of my videos, but this is going to be a foundation video that explains what exactly I'm talking about when I allude to it. So firepower is an umbrella term. It includes a lot of different attributes, and I just mentioned some of them. Mobility also would be an umbrella term. We will include lightweight, ease of carry, portability, and reliability. Under that, I'll explain what I mean by that in the historical context. So let's get going. By the way, this is not an old argument. This is an argument that has gone on for forever. Ever since warfare has began with mankind, going way back, the mobility versus firepower argument has existed. And granted, again, these are umbrella terms. You could term it mobility versus armor, mobility versus protection. Let's go back a ways, and I'm going to use different visual aids for this, but let's talk about some World War II weapons. Like the pretty much feared Tiger I tank, the Panzerkampfwagen 6. This was an outstanding tank of World War II, highly feared by the Allies, and for good reason. This, of course, is a 1/72nd scale model made by Dragon Models. Really cool, and it makes a very good visual aid for this. What's made the Tiger tank, the Tiger I, so feared? Well, first off, it was armed, heavily armed. This was an 88mm gun here that had incredible capabilities. It was a KWK-36 high-velocity 88mm gun that could pretty much knock out any Allied tank at range, at least all the way up to 1944 and the first part of 1945. Amazingly capable. And what am I talking about? Well, it could take out a British Cromwell tank at 2,500 meters. Cromwell tank could never take out a Tiger tank just because it was too armored. We'll talk about that in a second. When it went up against this tank, the Sherman, it could take out an M4A2, the first versions of the Sherman, at 1,800 meters. The Sherman's gun, not this version, but the earlier M4A3 and M4A2 guns could not take out a Tiger tank at any range. Now, when they upgraded the Sherman to the M4A4, 1,800 meters, the Tiger could still take out the Sherman tank. And if the Sherman was lucky enough to close within 700 meters, it could perhaps take out the Tiger I tank. Now, the British upgraded the Sherman, and I'll talk more specifics here as we go along. And I am going to give you a lot of specifics, bear with me, because there's going to be individuals that watch this video that know a lot about this subject matter. So I have to get my facts straight, and I will, for the most part. And it will tie back into, again, the mobility versus firepower argument. I can pretty much guarantee it. And what I'm talking about here is very germane to the subject. It is that exact argument, and I'm going to use these tanks as a historical example of exactly what I'm talking about. The Sherman Firefly was given a 17-pounder British gun, which was very capable, and that pretty much put the Sherman on par with the Tiger I as far as range and capability, gun versus gun. But that Firefly tank came late in the war. This is actually a Sherman E8, I believe, is the version of this one, that had the 76mm gun by the Americans. Not quite as effective as that 17-pounder by the Brits. But let's get back to the Tiger tank. It was a fearsome weapon because of that gun. That gun was tremendously capable. Watch the movie Kelly's Heroes. That's a great movie, by the way. It's an old movie, put out in the late 60s, I think. A lot of you younger guys would probably know what I'm talking about. Kelly's Heroes with Clint Eastwood. Look at it. It's a great movie. Captures a lot of the great lingo in the 1960s. Hilarious. And it also shows a Tiger tank. And you can kind of see how the Allies looked at a Tiger tank. And I think that movie pretty accurately captured the sentiment about the Tiger tank. It was highly feared. Again, because of that 88mm gun. But also because of its armor. The armor, we're talking about the thickness of the steel that this thing had. It was incredible. On the front portion of the turret, it was 100 and then later 110 millimeters thick. By way of reference, from the tip of my finger to the beginning of this pink mark, that's what I'm talking about. That's 110 millimeters of steel. And that's what the Tiger had. It was impervious to all but the most powerful Allied guns in a frontal shot. And that includes the Soviet T-34, 76, versions of the Sherman like I talked about, all the British tanks pretty much would bounce right off the Tiger I. On the side of the turrets, it was about 80 millimeters thick, and then about 25 millimeters on the top and bottom. So it was a very heavily armored tank. That was a good thing. It made it very difficult to destroy. About the only way you could do it is get behind it where the armor was weak, and again, maybe get underneath it, or get a shot on the suspension and immobilize it by blowing its treads off. And then once a tank is immobilized, it's much easier to knock out. What were some other good things of the Tiger I? Well, it was also very capable over terrain for as heavy as it was, and it was very heavy. Specifically, it was 121,000 pounds. That's a lot of weight. I'll talk about the disadvantage of that in a second. But along with that, they gave it a very wide track. And specifically, it was about 72 centimeters wide on the track. Here's another version. Desert version, mid-1943. And that's the track I'm talking about. So this distance, in order to spread out that weight, by the way, using a Steigerwalt NRA version as my pointer today, nice knife. Maybe you'll get a review of that later. 72 centimeters across, so it was able to traverse some pretty gnarly terrain too. For a tank that heavy, that's amazing. So great armor, great capabilities with its gun. It can knock out any Allied tank, Soviet tank, Allied tank, any kind, just totally waste it. Fairly, well, I was going to say fairly reliable. It had an HL-230, 700 horsepower Maybach engine, petrol, not diesel. It was okay. It did serve the purpose. And this is going to dovetail into the weaknesses of this firepower type tank. Remember, we're talking about mobility versus firepower, and the Tiger tank represents firepower. Just like I said, heavy armor, heavy armament made it a very capable weapon. If you were an Allied tank commander in the 1940s and you came across a Tiger, you better have a fair amount of Shermans with you. In fact, the saying went, to take out one Tiger, you needed 5 Shermans. Expect to lose 4 of them. That's pretty much the case. In the hands of a very talented commander, like this dude, Michael Wittmann, the Tiger was simply amazing. This was one of Germany's greatest tank aces, and in June of 1944, after D-Day invasion, this experienced and very proven tank commander from the Eastern Front found himself in Normandy. And he squared off against, I believe it was a 7th Armored Division of the British, and he took out 27 tanks and light armored vehicles with a single Tiger tank. That is how capable the weapon is. And it functioned best in the ambush role, which Michael Wittmann knew well. And then he rolled into the village of Werent. I hope I say that right. I think that's the name of it. There you go. By the way, this is the book by Chris Bishop. German Weapons of World War II, FYI. And then he rolled into Werent and took out some more tanks. Wasted them. Pretty amazing weapon. In the hands of a competent tank commander, hopefully with some infantry support, the Tiger ruled the battlefield. However, was it perfect? I mean, if it was so awesome, why didn't the Germans win the war? Right? That's a fair question. Tiger tank, if it was so awesome, how come we were able to roll across Normandy and then into, Germany and subsequently win the war? Well, while it was very capable in terms of its armament and armor, the Tiger had some very big disadvantages as well. First off, the turret was very slow to traverse. He had a very slow movement. In a fast-running firefight or tank-to-tank battle, or heck, even an in-town infantry battle, the Tiger was at a disadvantage. If somehow the motor was off, the traverse, normally powered hydraulically, had to be moved by hand, making it even slower and more laborious to an already heavily worked crew. That's bad. Tiger tank was slow. It was not a fast tank. Could it keep up with some of the other tanks like the Panzerkampfwagen 4s? No, it couldn't. And this was very damaging to the Tiger. It had a very limited range. Very limited. It was so heavy that 121,000 pounds and the 700 horsepower motor drank a lot of gas. Cross country, the range on this thing was a whopping 37 miles. You heard that right. More or less, but you get the picture. The speed cross-country is about 12 miles per hour. That's end of part 1. Tune in. We're going to keep talking about mobility versus firepower using the Tiger tank as the example of history. Nutnfancy.